My man, you looking for them videos, huh? Some of them pretty good. How many views we get on those things? I know that, but now that we're in all 50 states, it's got to be millions a year. Yeah, 1.5 million views last year. You want that? Our vision, our business. Well, since I retired, the people that took over, I, I have no idea. They certainly don't want to hear anything from me. They might listen to you, but I doubt it. You know, I mean, I got all kind of ideas. That's one reason they, got to go. Can't have ideas around here. So all right, ladies, quietly. I know that ain't gonna happen. Dun, 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 dun. And here are the ladies. All right, gang, we're gonna get started now. We're a little bit behind schedule. Most of y'all know me. I'm John Shenholzer. I'm the co-founder of the McShen Foundation. I'm retired from the McShen Foundation. I don't work there anymore, but I do volunteer a lot, and I still do a lot of stuff I was doing back when they were paying me. So retirement ain't all it's cracked up to be. As you know, we come in here every 2 weeks here and every 2 weeks at West. We're always grateful that the sheriff lets us in here so we can connect with you guys and give you that message of hope. The hope being that you can stop using drugs, lose that desire to use drugs, and find a new way to live. Of course, cannabis ain't a drug, right? For some. Anyway, that's a different topic. So, staying clean. I was talking to a fella today. He came through here, and he's actually going to speak next week at West. But he was telling me, he was saying, man, I kept telling everybody what I was going to do when I get out. Apparently, he's been out a couple months, maybe a few months. But he said, I had always had his dream to be a barber. And he called me. We talked today. And by God, he's got his own little barber shop somewhere down off of Broad Street. And he was so excited and so happy. And he said, people said I couldn't do it, but I knew I could do it. And then by me and Marshall bringing this meeting in here, connecting, giving them hope, saying, look, if you keep it simple, you can do anything you want. And he went on to say how his PO was so impressed that he took him off reporting and everything, And he said, man, everything is just going so fast, so good, it's unbelievable. I said, that's a great talk. He's going to come here, I guess soon enough. But the point is this. It is simple. I ain't saying it's always easy, but it's simple. Hey, we got a meeting going on, fellas. Meeting going on. Now, y'all get to spend all day with each other, all week, matter of fact. We just come in here for an hour, so just give me an hour. I'd appreciate it. But recovery is just so simple. It ain't that hard to go out there and not repeat and reoffend and keep doing things. It just ain't that. I mean, it's simple stuff. Guy like me can stay clean. I know you can stay clean. But what I liked about that phone call was the guy had a vision. He had a plan, and he stuck by it. And it materialized. And I thought that was a good hit. Because a lot of times we'll have plans and visions, and we'll go outside, and next thing you know, we get tripped up. We don't follow our plan or our vision. And it's real easy to get distracted. Real easy. One thing I've learned about recovery is a word called focus. If you get a vision, you focus on your plan, you focus on your vision, you got to avoid those distractions because distractions are everywhere. And distractions kill. Think about it. Great friend of mine. He was clean 5 years, 3 different times. He was doing good one year, and he went to the paint store to get a gallon of paint to paint his mama's beach cottage, and he met his old drug dealer there, and they found him dead. Distractions. Distractions kill. And you're going to get them everywhere you go. So I always say, look, man, we come up in here, you focus on that message. If you focus on the message, you'll probably get a hit that you can use when you leave here. And when you leave here, you get an idea, you get a vision, what your recovery is going to look like, what your pathway is going to look like. You hold on to that because it's possible. It's real possible. And by the way, Marshall sends his regards. He's at another meeting tonight helping another person celebrate an anniversary. So he says hello. Now, tonight, I think he's a really good speaker. I might pull my chair around so I can hear it because I ain't got my hearing aids in. I said that once already. But I started meeting this fella in jails and prisons and treatment centers for the last 40 years. I remember meeting him in a rehab 30-something years ago, and then I was taking a meeting into Camp 13. It might have been this camp. I don't know. And there he is, and I seen him in Deep Meadows or whatever they call these DOC spots. But he eventually got out and did real good. He stayed focused. He avoided those distractions. And I just think he's a hell of a guy, man. He's got a hell of a message. So I don't want to waste any more of his message time. So let's give a warm welcome to Greg Grant.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg. I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Hey, Greg.
I'm going to try to find a place to stand. I'm used to standing behind a podium, so I guess I'll have to move around a little bit. So if I have my back to anybody, I apologize. I was coming down here tonight, and I was talking to my wife earlier, and she asked me, she said, do you get nervous before you speak? And I said, yeah, I do get nervous. And she said, well, nobody knows your story better than you do. I said, well, why don't you come down here and tell your story then? You know, since it's so easy. But it's an honor and a privilege to be here tonight, to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope. I'm going to talk about what it was like. I'm going to tell you what happened, and I'm going to tell you what it's like today. And also, I'm going to preface what I say by saying that I know what it's like to sit right there where you're sitting and have somebody come in and share their story and have a little bit of sense of hopelessness, a little sense of whatever you're thinking about, whatever it is that you're feeling. But I remember one of the first people I ever heard speak was John. He came to a treatment center. And I said to myself, I want what that man has. But I had no idea how to get it because I couldn't stop drinking and I couldn't stop using drugs. To start my story, I grew up in an area in Southside called Hillside Court. If anybody's familiar with that area, it's not the same as it is when I was growing up. I lived there till I was about 5 or 6 years old. And just a blue-collar area. We lived right there off of Harwood Street. And I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember I'd go meet my brother when he got out of school. He went to a school there called Oak Grove Annex, in case anybody knows that area. And then we moved. We moved into an area called the Fan area. We moved to the 2500 block of Hanover Avenue down in the Fan area. And that's when I started to notice things that were going on in my household. We were a blue-collar family. My mother was a wholesale jeweler. My father, him and his brother owned a cemetery, an African-American cemetery down in Chester, Virginia, and he sold cemetery plots back in the 60s. And what else I found out was that he drank. I didn't pay that much attention to it till early on. He was what was known as a binge drinker. He drank probably 3 or 4 times a year, but he would drink for a month and a half, and we'd eventually have to put him in an area called Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital over in the north side. And I remember him coming home. Our whole lives depended on whether he was drinking or not. How we lived depended on whether he was drinking or not. And when he came home, he was a violent person. We couldn't show any type of emotion, no type of feeling when he was around, because if we did, we would get beat. So there was no crying, no cheerleading, none of that going on in my household. What it mostly consisted of was fear, anxiety, discontent, and just being scared and fearful most of the time. But when my father was not drinking, he was a good man. He was a good father, took care of us, and it was the Jekyll and Hyde deal. So when he wasn't drinking, things were pretty good in my household. I remember growing up, I went to a school called William Fox Elementary School down on Hanover Avenue. And I started in the kindergarten, stayed there through 6th grade. My education is Albert H. Hill, and then I'll get into the first year of busing. If anybody remembers the first year of busing, I went to a school called B.A. Graves, Benjamin Graves. It was at the corner of Adams and Lee Street, across from the Bojangles statue, across from Fat Boy's Hamburgers, if anybody knows where that is. And that's another story in itself. And then I went to Thomas Jefferson High School from there. But I remember my father, and I mention my father a lot because, he was an integral part of the way that I felt a lot of times and the stuff that was going on. When he came home and he was drinking, my mother would grab my brother and I, and we'd have to leave the house because he would be violent. He would be violent toward her. We would have to leave get out of harm's way, and we would go to restaurants. I remember going to a lot of those restaurants in the Fan area, and we would sit there for hours and hours. Then we eventually go back home and hope my father had either passed out or he had left. And that went on for many, many, many years. And I grew up mostly at the Old Boys Club on Robinson Street. And if anybody remembered the Old Boys Club on Robinson Street, I spent most of my childhood there around other kids and so forth. And we were just little hoodlums running the street. We'd steal bottles off the back of people's porches back then. You get a nickel apiece for a bottle back then. We'd steal shopping carts from the A&P grocery store, and we'd fill up shopping carts, and we would go get money. And we were brazen too. We didn't care if you were having dinner. We'd run onto the back of your porch while you were looking out and steal your bottles off the back of the porch. And I grew up in a place called Addison Street in the Fan area. And one day we got one of the local alcoholics or winos, whatever we called them back then, to go in and get us a case of Smith's beer. I was 11 years old at that time. And I think a six-pack of Smith's beer was 89 cents, if anybody remembers that. So we had a case, and we go into the alleyway, and we drink a couple of them. And I drank about 3, 4, or 5 of them. And I remember when I drank those cans of beer, I felt differently. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't fearful. I wasn't nervous. And I wasn't afraid. And I remember that I want to feel like this for a long time, because when I wasn't drinking beer, fear, anxiety, stress, all the above. My childhood wasn't very pleasant. And another thing that was going on in my household too, I had an older brother who they would say, why don't you like your older brother? My brother got straight A's. And I realized early on in school, they didn't identify it then, but I had a learning disability. I could not comprehend things unless I read them 3, 4, or 5 times. And somebody had to show me. So the teachers would think that I was being disruptive or I was just not paying attention. And I remember, them saying, I can't wait to talk to your mother, to talk to her what's going on with you, where you're not doing your homework. And back then, they talk about secrets. You don't talk about what's going on in your house. You don't tell anybody about your father being an alcoholic. I remember one time, my mother said, go get your father. He was down at the local restaurant, and it was snowing like crazy. And he wasn't there, and my brother and I were walking home, and we looked over. He was laying face first on the sidewalk, face down in the snow, 30-some degrees outside, freezing. And had we not come and got him up, he may have froze to death. I don't know what happened, but we got him up and got him home. And this went on for quite some time. Christmas time was horrible in our household. People look forward to getting presents and family and all that stuff. And in my household, my father would come home drunk, abusive. I learned early on, don't show no emotion. I don't ever remember crying. I don't know if your parents ever said this, but if you cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And that's what happened in my household. I would get beat mercifully if I showed any type of weakness or any emotion. And I look back now, man, it had an unbelievable impact on my life and how I felt. At Christmas time, my father would come home. That's what would happen. We'd end up having to leave again. And he'd come home. He would fall face first in the Christmas tree, knock the Christmas tree down. My mother would yell at him, and he'd be gone again. He'd leave the house. We wouldn't see him for a couple of days, few days, whatever it was. And we don't know where he went, where he took off to. But this went on for quite some time. And I remember in school, I used to get bullied as a kid. Even today, I'm a sensitive, loving, caring individual. And I was thinking about that coming down here tonight. My wife was telling me, she said, what's it like going back to jail? Because it was April 2nd, 1985, when I first got arrested. That was my first time ever being locked up at the old Richmond City Jail down on Fairfield Way. And I'm down on G1. I go, oh my God, I've never been locked up before. I got arrested for possession with intent to distribute cocaine. Got out on bond April 9th. The same guy that I grew up with, knew all my life, set me up again, back down to jail. But I'll get further, and that's why I wanted to tell you that I know what it's like to sit there and see people come in, share their story, and so forth. Fast forward a little bit. One Christmas night, 1970, Christmas night, December 26th, my father came home, the usual, fall on the Christmas tree, beat us, beat my mother, and they'd get to arguing, then he would leave. The next morning, a couple of the guys in suits showed up, and they made us aware that my father had been robbed and killed up in Fairfax, Virginia. On Christmas night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he was pronounced dead. And I remember praying that something would change in my house. I remember sticking the pillow over my head as a kid so I didn't hear the arguing and hear the yelling and the screaming. And I remember one night praying, God, please change something in our household, help my father. And I felt so terrible when we got that news the next morning that he was robbed and killed. And I remember running, just taking off and running. And I ran probably for a mile and a half. And I ended up over a friend of mine's house. And I remember a couple days later, his body lay up at a place called, right there at Boulevard and Park Avenue. I can't remember what the funeral home was. R.L. Christian Funeral Home. And I remember going in there before anybody else did and just looking in the casket and looking at him and go, what do we do now, Dad? What's going to happen now? What's going to happen to us? How do we go on? And it's a 13-year-old kid. It was just absolutely traumatizing. As much as I despised my father's behavior, I can't imagine what was going on with him that made him drink the way that he did. Come home and urinate, and piss on himself, defecate on himself, have DTs, and I would have to be the one to take care of him. Then all of a sudden he's gone. And I said to myself, I don't ever want to be like that. What would make him want to be like that? And I don't know the history. I remember my grandparents, they were from Buena Vista up in the mountains. They lived on Monument Avenue right there at Meadow. And I remember going over there and seeing my grandfather sitting up in a chair. Never ever moved, never ever smiled. I don't know whether he was stone drunk out of his mind or afraid to say anything because my grandmother was the matriarch of that family. They were loan sharks, they were bootleggers, and they had probably 30 or 40 rooming houses at the time. And I remember, go kiss your grandmother. And I would go kiss her, it'd be like kissing leather. And I thought to myself, when my father died, that they would help us. And my mother was a blue-collar lady from an area called Oregon Hill. Oregon Hill. She had a lot of pride. She had a lot of sisters, and she had 2 brothers. One of her brothers got shot and killed at a restaurant called Triggs down at Cary and Laurel one day. I remember that. I think I was 11 years old when that happened. But I thought my grandparents would help us, because my mother was by herself and we were by ourselves. And my mother said, don't go over there anymore. We don't want to have anything to do with those people. Because she blamed those people for the way my father was, because he was always at their beck and call, any hour of the night, any time of the day. If they needed him, he was there. And I remember seeing some pictures at one time of my father and his brother, and they had on matching outfits. And I said, why they got matching outfits on? They look like these white uniforms, whatever. They were at the State Farm, out off of Patterson Avenue a long, long time ago. So they enabled him. He was never able to get the help that he needed. I remember a trip over to Westbrook Psychiatric Hospital one time, and I'll never forget this. He come out in his pajamas. He was a good-looking man. He looked like a movie star. And there was this lady sitting over there on a bench by herself. And he looked at me and he said, you know who that lady is? I didn't know. I was just a kid. He said it was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. It was Judy Garland, because she was a terrible alcoholic too who could not get sober. I said, can I go say something to her? He said, no, you can't go talk to her. So this kind of pattern went on for a long time, and I still felt the way I felt, and I felt so empty inside. I never felt like I belonged. I never felt like I fit in. I always felt alone, and I still felt fearful because what are we going to do now? But what I found out, then busing came along. Everybody remembers busing. I said, Lord, where am I going to school? They said, you're going to B.A. Graves. I said, B.A. Graves? Where is that? It was at the corner of Adams and Lee Street, across from the Bojangles statue and Fat Boy Hamburgers. And that my father used to take me to school during that time. And then when he was killed, I had to catch the bus. And getting from Adams and Broad down to school was quite a challenge. Getting beat up, getting chased, running. Here I am running again, which was sort of a pattern in my life. Then finally, they accepted me because I would fight back. I'd get the shit kicked out of me, but I would fight back. Whichever one was running the mouth the most was the one I'd hit. We all know that. Then finally, they accepted me in. Then I went to Thomas Jefferson High School. My older brother was an all-metro, all-state football player. Why can't you be like your brother? Those old tapes. I was always the younger brother. Had difficulty in school, couldn't learn. But what I found out in school was that if I sold drugs, back then it was marijuana, then it was methamphetamine, then I would get the recognition that I wanted. I felt like I was in charge. I felt like I was somebody when people were coming to me because I had what they wanted. And I had money in my pocket. I had a brand new 71 Chevelle Malibu with a 350 engine when I was in high school. Because we got some of the proceeds from my father's insurance. We bought that car, and I drove that car most of the time. My brother got a scholarship to go play football at VMI up in Lexington, Virginia. And I kind of laugh about that now. I tell people all the time, my brother went to Penn State, I went to the state pen. A little humor there. My wife doesn't think it's too funny, but anyway. So got through high school. I got into the nightclub business. I was a disc jockey in a nightclub. I worked the floor in nightclubs. I was selling methamphetamine by the kilos back in high school. And I was staying up for days. I remember one time I stayed up for 8 days drinking alcohol. I was up to about a fifth a day of Patron, tequila. I was doing about a half a gram, 3/4 of a gram of methamphetamine. This stuff that I had, you didn't need but a couple lines of it. And I stayed up for 8 days, and I had to go check myself into emergency room because I started hallucinating. I'd been up so long, sleep deprivation. Too much alcohol in my system. I'm surprised I didn't die from it. Eventually, I pull up into a friend of mine's house. We were partners in it. There were state police officers all around, undercover agents all around. He had gotten busted. I circled on out, went on out, and came on and went back home. And I said, I'm going to try to get on the straight and narrow. I was tired of living that lifestyle of being fearful all the time. The lifestyle that I lived was not conducive to a positive outcome. Jails or death. I thought my life was going to be jails or death. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living. I didn't know how to live. I was afraid of living, not dying. Because if I lived an alcoholic, drug-addicted life like I did, I didn't want to go on. I did not want to go on. Nightclub business, I was a disc jockey. I share this story all the time. A friend of mine owned a club down at Harrison Broad called Infinity. It was an African-American club. And he asked me to help him one weekend. Prince was in town. Prince came out with his first album with Sexy Dancing, I Just Want to Be Your Lover. And he played at the Coliseum, the Richmond Coliseum. We had a meet and greet up there. He came up there, him and his manager, talking to me just like I'm sitting here today talking to you guys. And Prince didn't say a whole lot. He did say, do you have a dressing room? And I said, no, sir, but we got a big office. And you're welcome to that. Thank you for coming here. Congratulations on your new album. I never realized I was in front of greatness. This guy. And it wasn't back then, you didn't have the cameras and stuff. Oh my God. And I tell people that story, they go, Greg, you didn't meet Prince. And I actually did. Because I tell people so many things now. That went on for a long time. I'd leave that club that I worked at. I went to work at an after-hours club called Laurel and Broad, down at the corner of Laurel and Broad. I was a disc jockey then. I worked the floors. And I had become somebody that I didn't recognize. Because in order to live and survive, even in my own household, I had to become somebody I wasn't and become something that I wasn't. So I had built this persona, this tough guy persona, fighting all the time. And I was getting my ass kicked some nights. And my friends say, oh, man, you did a great job. I'd be all black and blue. And I hung out in those bars where you could get a cold beer and a black eye. Those are the bars I hung out in. You get a cold beer and a black eye. And that's generally what I would get. And my friends say, oh, you did a great job. You look good. You stood up. Those are the kinds of friends I had back then. So I remember cocaine became the rage at the time. Remember I said I was going to try to go straight and try a different life. I worked at McDonald's at Hamilton and Broad. I was a cook. Then I became a manager. A couple of times I had smoked pot with the upper management folks, and I don't know what happened. I don't know what the deal was. They said $35 was missing. I said, well, I'll put the $35 in the register since I'm responsible. And I did that. And they said, we want you to take a polygraph test. And I was so proud that I'd worked my way up from cooking in the kitchen to being a manager. I'm on the straight and narrow. But something happened that these people didn't want me there. I don't know whether they knew something I didn't know or whatever. I wasn't like, hey, give me a quarter pound and a quarter ounce. That wasn't going on where I worked. I wasn't doing that. So anyway, the test came back that I was lying. I said, let me take another test. Came back, they said I was lying again. So they let me go. You know what I said? Fuck this. I'm going back to selling drugs. I'm going back to selling drugs. I'm going back to my comfort zone. I'm going back to doing that. And I did that. And I mean, I sold a ton of it. But you know, one thing about being an addict and an alcoholic, you can't win in that game. You know how they talk about don't ever do your own product? That's what I was doing. Long story short, at the height of my addiction, and I was drinking a fifth a day and doing about an 8 ball of cocaine a day. I have no earthly idea why I didn't die, except that God saved me. Here's the bottom line. I was driving down here tonight thinking about this. I drove 50 miles down here to open up my heart, be vulnerable, be authentic, and be honest in a place where you can't be that. You know, when I was down to jail on 1701 in Fairfield in 1985, you couldn't be that. So I got in trouble. I had 2 felonies at the time for possession with intent to distribute. I told you the guy set me up. I go into treatment. My attorney says, you got to go to treatment. That's how I met John. John came in and spoke. That was 1985, somewhere like that. And I said, I want what that man's got. I left that 28-day treatment center. I went to a place called Human Resources, 919 West Gray Street. down there with the village and the Newgate prison and Lee Art Theater, you know. I thought it was some kind of test. And I got 2 felony charges against me. I had never had a felony charge. I've been arrested for gambling. I've been arrested for assault. I've been arrested for all this stuff. And it was all misdemeanors. And it was starting to add up. So now I'm in the big leagues. I got 2 felonies for possession with intent to distribute. I get an attorney. You know, everybody's worried. Hey, man, you need anything? Let me give you that money for your attorney. I'm going to help your mama while you locked up. You're going to be all right. Yeah, I'm going to be all right. You know, what do you need? Huh? You know, give me money for attorney then, I guess, because I was broke. I had my shit in a trash bag. Here I am, this big shot. I got my stuff in a trash bag going into treatment. My goal back then was just to leave treatment with a suitcase. I go to 919. I spend 3.5, 4 months there. I'm starting to change. We got a board. You put your feelings up. You ever seen those where you put your feelings up? How you feeling? I feel like I'm making some progress. I got to go to court. I got an AA sponsor who's like a father to me. He goes to court with me. Sergeant Santa's in the court with me. You remember Sergeant Santa? Anybody remember Sergeant Santa? He's in the court with me. You know, and I go in front of them. They revoke my bond. I get charged with 3 more felonies. I got 5 felonies. These 3 are for distribution of cocaine. And I'm thinking, Lord, what do I do now? I'm down at the jail, down at Fairfield Way, in the jungle. I'm going to tell you something. City jail in 1985, no air conditioning. You could smoke back then. No air conditioning. It was like you sweat every day. It was like the jungle. Same thing back in school. It's like fighting, survival. You know, that's what it's like. And I'm going, here I am again, back in my comfort zone because I'm used to this. I'm used to chaos. I'm used to being afraid, being fearful. And I tell you what, being down in jail was something to be fearful about. I mean, I got the shit kicked out of me a few times down there, and then, you know, same thing I did. I hit the guy that was running his mouth the most. And I was in treatment with this lady, and I was talking to this young black guy one day, and he said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Where were you before you came out?" I said, "I was in treatment center on Gray Street." I said, 919 West Gray Street. He said, "You might have knew my mother. Her name was Shirley." I said, "Yeah, I knew Shirley." I said, "Yeah, she was a sweet lady. I liked her." It was his mother. This guy, to this day, I remember his name was K.K. McFall. He was, yeah, K.K. McFall. Yeah, Stone. They said this guy was Stone Killer. Yeah, but he took a liking to me. Anybody came mess with me, guess what? They had to deal with KK. You know, so anyway, when I look back now, what I thought was the worst day of my life, when they arrested me, I got 5 felonies. I'm getting ready to go to court, and I'll tell you that in quick, and then we'll move on. What I thought was the worst day of my life turned out to be the best day of my life. I want you to think about that. I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop doing drugs. My life sucked. It turned out to be the best day of my life. And the police officers told me, they came to that club that I worked at, and they said, "We're coming to get you soon." I said, "Well, can you make it sooner rather than later? Because I'm dying here." So I go to court. I go down in front of a Judge Lumpkin. You know, now you get in trouble for drugs. They put you in court, drug court, and that kind of stuff. Back then, my attorney said, "You're going to get 10 years. You do 20 months. They called me in front of a grand jury. They wanted me to give them information. They wanted me to tell on some people. They were giving me some names. Hey, you do 6 months, do a year and a half, whatever it was. And I live by a code. I still live by that code. I still live by that code today. I own up to what I do. I do my time. I wanted to come back home to Richmond and look people in the eye. I got street cred today. I got street cred with people. I'm not even in the game, but I got street cred. I can go anywhere. People know I did my time. I came home, and I got in recovery. And I'm going to tell you something real quick. I was supposed to get that 10 years, and I'm standing up in the court. Sergeant Santa's there again. I said, shit, they're going to listen to Sergeant Santa because he used to be a police officer. He was a homicide detective, I think. My sponsor's in the room. My mama's in the room. But I'm in the kind of trouble that my mama can't get me out of, and apparently my attorney can't get me out of. So that 10 years turned into, they gave me 38 years. The judge looked at me, he said, I know you got all these people here going to say all these nice things about you, but you belong in the penitentiary. And I went, that didn't sound good. It didn't sound like 10 years. He suspended 18, I had 20 years. I did 5.5 years on a 20-year sentence. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. When I was down to nothing, God was up to something. And what God was up to was to slow my sorry ass down, let me take a look at myself and realize how screwed up my life is and how screwed up I am. And I got out. I still got my card somewhere in my wallet. I got out in June of 91. I went back down to that drug program down on Gray Street. That was part of my release. That was part of my release. And I stayed there for another year. And thank God that I did, because I was institutionalized. You know, I think people 15, 20, 30 years locked up, I thought that's what it was, but 5.5 years I was institutionalized. I went to that drug program. I got a job, got into the advertising business. My life's going well. I can't go nowhere to meet anybody. I got a probation officer, man. I come every day, 5 days a week to see him. You know, give the urine test. I'm going down to the methadone clinic. I'm going out to Staples Mill Road and all this stuff. And I can't meet anybody. I put a personal ad in. I worked for a style magazine at the time. I put a personal ad in the newspaper, and I put all this stuff in there that, well, none of it true. I just wanted to meet some girls. I said, shit, man, I've been locked up a long time. I want to meet somebody. I meet this girl. We go out, and I tell her that I'm financially secure. I'm telling her I'm this and I'm that. I got a pot to piss in. I got these old high-top shoes on and shit, you know. Go to pick her up in a old Granada car I bought, with the headliner hanging down. And she said, I thought you had some money. I said, well, I do, but I ain't going to spend it all on you the first night. We went out that night. We went out the next night. She is my wife today. We've been together 30 years. And she's been through this storm too. She's seen it. I had 19 years not drinking. But I didn't work on the trauma. I didn't work on the hurt. I didn't work on the pain and suffering that I had been through. I didn't talk about it. The grief of my father being killed. The pain of trying to live up to my brother. The pain of my mother dying in 2005. My son's mother died a couple years ago. I put my dog down in 2000, right after Christmas time in 2018. I ended up face first in the parking lot of the psychiatric ward the next morning. That was 2018. And I remember being angry that I was still alive. I remember being angry because I didn't know how to deal with the pain. I didn't know how to sit down with my sponsor to say, hey, I'm hurting. Because in my household, you didn't ask for help. You didn't show emotion. And those old tapes would play. I still have difficulty calling my sponsor sometimes. He's got to call me and say, are you all right? And the biggest lies I ever tell people, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm wonderful. And I'd be on the brink of suicide. But I don't have the balls to do that. You know, I don't have the balls to do that. I finally surrendered back in 2018 after I left St. Mary's Hospital. That's my sobriety date, January 5th, 2018. But I finally had to surrender. They told me I had to surrender. In my household, you didn't surrender. You didn't show weakness. If you did, you got the shit beat out of you. And that's what happened. That's the way my life was. When I sat down with another man and revealed all that hurt and pain and cried with him, and told him that my whole life was a lie, that I was scared, and I was fear. I was scared. I was as scared coming out of jail as I was going in jail, because I still didn't know how to live. But through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't go to NA too much this day and time, but I used to go at one time. I don't care where I get my recovery. I don't care where I get it. I go to meetings every day. I get on my knees and pray, because that's what God wants me to do. Then he wants me to get off my knees and go do something about it. And that's go to meetings every day, work the 12 steps, get with my sponsor. I get with my sponsor every once in a while, not much, because I can share with you people the same hurt and pain and trauma that I share with him. I don't have to hide anymore. I'm comfortable in my own skin today. Now, some of those old tapes still play every once in a while. I'm less than, I don't belong. You're not going to mount to nothing. You're not going to be nothing. Those tapes still play, but they motivate me today. I don't have a compulsion or an obsession to drink today. I don't think about drinking, because I know if I take one drink today, my life is over with as I know it. I'll lose my wife. I'll lose my job. I'll probably lose my life, because I probably won't come back in and pick up another white chip, because I picked up 4 white chips. I've been to 5 different treatment centers. John helped me get in treatment center in 2016, came and sat with me, and my wife took me to the airport to make sure I got on the plane in 2016, because I couldn't put one foot in front of the other again, because I hadn't dealt with all that hurt and pain and that trauma again. I made a conscious decision. I don't use the word relapse. I made a conscious decision to drink again, but nothing changed. Nothing changes if nothing changes. But still I drank, until I sat down and did a 4th and 5th step and talked about my father dying. I remember one night I was so messed up, I went out to the cemetery. He's buried at West Hampton Cemetery at Gaskins and Patterson. I never went to the funeral. I didn't know where he was. I'm out there drunk as high as hell, looking for his gravesite so I can go tell him how much I miss it. I still miss him today, 53 years later, but I don't have to drink over it. I come in here tonight, I can be vulnerable, I can be who I am, and I can tell you the way it was, what happened, and what it's like today. My life is not easy today. I got a great job, I got a great wife. I'm still on the grind. I had to give up gambling. I used to be a bookie. I had to give that up. I can't even watch sports anymore, because I ain't got no action on it. I ain't got no action on the game, so it ain't fun no more. And man, I tell you, March Madness is on. I can't watch it. Breaks my heart. I can't watch it, because it's just not good for me, because I just can't do it. But I'm so thankful. The reality of my life today is that this is what I think I was meant to do all along. I ducked the responsibility for so long, because, they told me when I went to a meeting at 210 Madison Street back in 1985, they said, you can't drink the rest of your life. I said, man, you crazy. The rest of my life? Are you kidding me? I was only 28 years old. I'm getting ready to turn 67. But what I can do is I can stay sober today. That's how I live my life today, one day at a time. And I do whatever it takes to stay sober. My wife said, hopefully you'll reach somebody and the message that you share will get to somebody. And I said, I hope so, but I know it'll help me. I know when I'm riding back home, I'll get to replay what I said and get to see you folks and stuff. And I'll pray for you tonight when I get home. But the bottom line is, my story ain't going to keep you sober. you have to get to a point where I've had fucking enough. I'm tired of being a fucking loser. I was a loser. I said, man, I can't put one foot in front of the other. I just can't do this no more. And like I said, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of living an alcoholic, drug-addicted life like my father did. And I looked at where he ended up. And thanks for letting me share my story tonight. And it was an honor to be here.
Good job. You brought back some memories. I was over there soaking it all in, remembering my upbringing. I think, holy shit, it's trauma night here. You know, I'll tell you a nice little story. I think it's nice. When I was in treatment in 1982, and keep in mind, I've been so far clean and sober since August 10th, 1982, when I first went into treatment at 23 years old. But, and I know I ain't out of the woods. I guarantee you I got a relapse in me. I know I got a relapse in me. That's why I keep doing today what I did yesterday. So should tomorrow get here, I'll be equipped to deal with it, because I love Greg. I love his story. I don't want exactly the same story, you know. So I've worked real hard to stay clean and sober. But I remember in rehab, for the first time in my adult life, we're in group and we're sharing your childhood, your upbringing. And I remember I was saying, well, you know, I come from a large family. My mama had 8 kids by the time she was 27. And my dad was a blackout drinker too, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And he used to come in drunk when we were kids and terrorize us, and he beat us all. You know, he would line the kids up and just beat the shit out of us. And I don't know why the fuck we're getting beat like this. It's crazy shit. No, there's no way you should be growing up. But I mean, when he passed away at 91, 45 years sober, I was blessed to give his eulogy. Out of all the kids, I was the one that got to do it. So it ended well. But I remember in treatment, I'm sitting there sharing all this stuff, my upbringing, the family beatings, the unjustness of it all. And that day, this is where the weird shit comes in. I got a letter from my brother, who never wrote me, only letter I ever got from him in my life. And he wrote me a letter saying, do you remember when we were kids, Dad used to beat us and line us up? He said, well, I was the one that committed the crimes that got us all beat, you know. And I'm thinking, whoa, what the fuck? This is serious shit. You know, how, you know, this is like, maybe I'm supposed to pay attention. You know what I mean? And the crimes were simple things like who turned the fan off, who left the light on. I mean, my dad was a depression baby. You know, that light, you leave a light on, that's a felony in my house. I don't know what the cost of a goddamn light bulb staying on is, but it's big business growing up. But anyways, you brought back a lot of good, I guess, good memories. You know, I really tapped into the feeling, so I appreciate that. I hope you got something out of tonight. I know I certainly did. I'm going to be up the rest of the night reliving my childhood. Cocksucker. But that's how we grow, you know what I mean? And as usual, thank the sheriff for letting us out here. We love to come out here and connect and carry that message, I hope. You know where to find us when you get out. And we're going to see you guys and girls in 2 weeks. Okay? Thank you very much.